Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. In a surprise development, US President Donald Trump has offered to mediate between India and China over the ongoing border dispute. We have discussed over the last few days that border tensions have escalated between the two countries at various locations along the border, including at the Panongso Lake, Demchok, and the Galwan River Valley in Ladakh, and at the Nakula Pass in Sikkim. Even though as both the countries are working behind the scenes to resolve the tensions through diplomatic negotiations, the US President has stepped in and he has tweeted that he is willing to negotiate between the two countries to resolve the border dispute. This is an interesting and surprising development because this is the first time that the United States has made such an offer with regard to the border dispute between India and China, and moreover, neither India nor China would be willing to accept any third-party mediation over their border dispute. See, in the past, President Trump has made controversial offers to mediate between India and Pakistan to resolve the Kashmir dispute. But each time, India had rejected these offers by stating that it believes in resolving border disputes only through bilateral negotiations with the country concerned, and hence, there is no scope for any third-party mediation. Even China, for that matter, has maintained pretty much the same stand with regard to its border disputes, and it believes in bilateral negotiations with the concerned country, and it does not entertain any third-party involvement. So considering the fact that both the countries are opposed to third-party mediation, it is quite interesting and surprising that President Trump chose to make such an offer, that too when neither India nor China have made such a request. Another interesting thing is that the US itself has a number of ongoing disputes and tensions with China, so it is unclear as to how the United States can be helpful in mediating the border dispute between India and China. Because see, the United States and China are currently in the middle of a diplomatic standoff over the COVID-19 pandemic. The US has clearly blamed China for the spread of the pandemic, and it has held China to be responsible. Upon this, both the countries have been engaged in a trade war over the last few years, and they also have a diplomatic and military standoff over the South China Sea conflict. More recently, the United States has threatened to impose sanctions against both Hong Kong and China as a result of the dilution of Hong Kong's autonomy as a special administrative region of China and the erosion of Hong Kong's basic law, which provided for the transfer of Hong Kong from Britain to China in 1997. So considering that the US itself has so many standing disputes and tensions with China, it is unclear as to how the US can be helpful to mediate the border dispute between the two countries. Now let us take up an article from page number 5, which deals with the special provisions that have been provided to scheduled areas under the 5th schedule of the Indian Constitution. But before we look at this article, first let us understand what are scheduled areas and what are the special provisions provided to them under the 5th schedule of the Indian Constitution. See, under the 5th schedule and Article 244 of the Indian Constitution, the President of India has been empowered to declare the establishment of scheduled areas in states in order to provide for special provisions for tribal areas and uphold tribal rights. Areas which are declared as scheduled areas under the 5th schedule, they are given special provisions and they are treated differently from other regular areas in the state. In these scheduled areas, the administrative jurisdiction of the state government does not extend completely, and the central government gains a greater responsibility for administering and governing these areas. Such scheduled areas can be established in all the states except for the tribal areas of Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram, because these states have been covered separately under the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Under this provision, the President can declare an entire state or a part of a state as a scheduled area. He also has the powers to declare that the scheduled area has ceased to exist, and he can even alter the boundaries of the scheduled areas. But however, for changing the boundaries of a scheduled area, the President has to consult with the governor of the state. So in this regard, the governor enjoys a special power, and there is no need to introduce a separate law to establish, alter the boundaries or to discontinue a scheduled area. Now let us talk about the criteria for declaring an area as a scheduled area. See, for declaring an area as a scheduled area, the following 4 conditions have to be met. 1. There has to be a preponderance of tribal population in the area. That is, the tribal population should be dominant in the area. Second, the area should be compact and of reasonable size. And third, the area should be underdeveloped. And the fourth criteria is that there should be marked disparity in economic standards of the people in the given area. If these four criteria are met, then the President can declare the area as a scheduled area under the 5th schedule and under Article 244. But please remember that these criteria are not laid down in the Constitution. Instead, they are drawn from other relevant laws and principles. Now let us talk about the special provisions that are provided to 5th schedule areas. See, under the 5th schedule, the governor of a state having a scheduled area acquires a few special powers and few special responsibilities. As a part of these responsibilities, the governor of such a state will have to submit an annual report to the President or submit a report as and when required by the President regarding the administration of scheduled areas in the state. And as we discussed earlier, the union government will acquire few special executive powers, and it can even issue directions to the state governments as the jurisdiction of the state governments stands reduced in scheduled areas. Then in states having a scheduled area, the President can provide for the establishment of a tribal advisory council to advise and assist the governor in the administration of these scheduled areas. The Constitution says that such tribal advisory councils cannot consist of more than 20 members, and 3/4 of these members shall be MLAs representing scheduled tribes in the Legislative Assembly of the state. So the main responsibility of the Tribal Advisory Council is to advise on the matters that have been referred to them by the governor and work with the state government and the central government to promote the welfare and the advancement of the scheduled tribes in the scheduled areas. As a part of his special powers, the governor can make rules prescribing or regulating the number of members of the Tribal Advisory Council. He can even regulate the mode of their appointment, the appointment of the chairman, the officers, and the servants thereof. The governor can even make rules to regulate the conduct of the meetings of the Tribal Advisory Council and regulate its procedure and other incidental matters. The most important special power enjoyed by the governor under the 5th schedule is that he can issue a public notification and direct that an act of the parliament or a law passed by the state legislature shall not apply to the scheduled area. He can even provide for the implementation of these laws with certain modifications in order to suit the special needs and circumstances of the scheduled area. Overall, the governor can make regulations for promoting peace and good governance in the scheduled area. Under these powers, the governor can restrict or prohibit the transfer of land amongst members of the scheduled tribe. He can regulate the allotment of land to members of the scheduled tribe, and he can even regulate the money lending business in the scheduled area in order to ensure that members of the scheduled tribe are not exploited by money lenders. So the 5th schedule of the Constitution gives these extraordinary powers to the governor, wherein the governor is even empowered to repeal or amend any act of the parliament or any act passed by the state legislature. But of course, these powers are not entirely discretionary in nature, and the governor is still bound to consult with the Council of Ministers of the state. He is bound by the directions issued by the President, and before issuing any notifications or regulations, he has to consult with the Tribal Advisory Council as well. Now coming back to the article, the governor of Maharashtra has invoked his special powers under the 5th schedule, and he has issued a notification to modify Section 6 of the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Act, or also known as the Forest Rights Act of 2006. This modification to the Forest Rights Act will allow the rightful claimants of forest rights to appeal against the decisions of the district level committee. See, to understand the impact of this modification, first you need to understand what is the Forest Rights Act. The Forest Rights Act of 2006 recognizes various forest rights of tribal communities and other traditional forest dwelling communities. It recognizes a variety of rights including land rights, usage rights, title rights, and community rights. These rights allow scheduled tribes and traditional forest dwelling communities to claim title rights over the forest areas that they have traditionally inhabited. It allows them to claim land rights over the agricultural lands that they have traditionally cultivated. It allows them to claim usage rights in order to collect forest produce, which has traditionally been a part of their livelihood. It also allows them to claim community rights and forest management rights in order to jointly use forest resources such as rivers, lakes, etc., and also to work towards their conservation and management. These rights are awarded to a tribal community or to a tribal farmer through a 3-step process. Now let's say, for example, a tribal farmer is claiming land rights to cultivate a piece of agricultural land that he has traditionally cultivated. Or let's say a member of a traditional forest dwelling community wants to claim title rights in order to continue inhabiting the forest areas. Then in these cases, those who are claiming these traditional forest rights, they need to first approach the Gram Sabha, which is the lowest unit of decentralized governance. See, under the Forest Rights Act, the Gram Sabha has been given enormous powers in the recognition and allocation of these rights. Because the Gram Sabha is truly a grassroots institution that represents the interests of the local community. So first, the Gram Sabha needs to pass a resolution recognizing the rights that have been awarded under the Forest Rights Act. Later, this resolution will be reviewed at the subdivisional level by the Taluk level committee. After these claims are verified, the resolution is passed on to the district level committee that comprises of government officials from various departments such as the Forest Department, the Revenue Department, the Tribal Welfare Department, etc. The district level committee also includes representation from the elected members of the Panchayat. So these forest rights will be accorded to members of the tribal community and traditional forest dwelling community after the resolution has been finally approved by the district level committee. But if the district level committee rejects the resolution, or if it rejects a few proposals, then these rights shall not be accorded to the members of the tribal community. Currently, members of the tribal community do not have a platform to appeal against the decision of the district level committee to reject their claims. So the modification introduced by the Maharashtra governor to the Forest Rights Act introduces an appeal process. This modification allows the tribal communities to appeal against the decisions of the district level committee if their claims have been rejected. This modification will apply for tribals in the PESA areas of Maharashtra, that is the areas where the PESA Act is in force. PESA stands for Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas. It basically extends the Panchayati Raj system to the scheduled areas. So through this modification, the tribal communities in Maharashtra can appeal against the decisions of the district level committee to reject their claims by approaching the divisional level committees that would be set up under the divisional commissioner. The divisional commissioner would be a senior IAS officer, and the committee headed by him would act as an appellate authority against the decisions of the district level committee. So the governor of Maharashtra has said that this modification would help in the enforcement of traditional forest rights that have been recognized under the Forest Rights Act of 2006. But this modification has been opposed by tribal welfare activists because according to them, it could delay the implementation of the Forest Rights Act. The activists have said that by making the divisional level committees as the appellate authority, the governor has made it difficult for tribal farmers to access justice. Because to approach the divisional level committees headed by the divisional commissioner, the tribal farmer would have to travel to the district headquarters, and in some cases, he would have to travel to other districts as well. So according to these activists, this difficulty in accessing the appellate committee could delay the implementation of the Forest Rights Act, and it basically amounts to the denial of justice to tribal communities and other traditional forest dwelling communities. Now let's take up an article from page number 11, which refers to the threat posed by locust swarms to Indian agriculture. Over the last few months, we have repeatedly covered the threat posed by desert locusts, which is a type of a grasshopper, to agriculture and food security in Africa and as well as in Asia. Since 2019, we have been tracking the emergence of a major locust swarm in the Horn of Africa region, that is in Eastern Africa, which includes countries such as Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, etc., which are present on Africa's Red Sea coast. Each of these locust swarms are anywhere between 8 to 10 kilometers in length and 2 to 3 kilometers in width. Each locust swarm is said to consist of millions of grasshoppers, and they are considered to be a major threat to agriculture because these locusts are voracious feeders. They have the ability to destroy large areas of agricultural fields in just a matter of few hours, and upon this, they have a very fast breeding rate, and they can also migrate over very large distances. So over the last 1 year, these locust swarms have migrated to West Asia, covering Saudi Arabia, Oman, etc. From there, they entered Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And over the last few weeks, these swarms have already made an entry into Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Considering the threat posed by these locust swarms, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has always warned that they are a major threat to global food security. India's Ministry of Agriculture has even established the Locust Warning Organization headquartered at Jodhpur in order to track and monitor these swarms that enter from Pakistan. See, according to the Locust Warning Organization, the last major locust swarm occurred back in the 1990s. After a gap of nearly 26 years, a minor locust swarm had entered India in 2019. But according to the Locust Warning Organization, the locust swarm that has entered India in this year poses a much bigger threat to agriculture, especially in western parts of India. Because unlike 2019, when most of the locusts were mature, the locusts that have entered in 2020 are largely immature. These locust swarms had earlier found favorable breeding grounds in the Balochistan and Sindh province of Pakistan, and the immature locusts that were born during this breeding season have entered India. So since these immature locusts are not fully grown, they will have a longer lifespan in India, and once they reach the adult stage, they are going to start breeding in India, and this is what is a cause of concern for Indian agriculture for the coming months, especially in the states of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, etc. These locust swarms are so hard to contain that even though Pakistan used aircrafts and helicopters to spray insecticides, the containment strategies were not effective, and hence they have managed to enter India. So clearly, India will be staring at a bigger challenge in the coming months, and this issue has been elaborated in a more detailed manner in a related editorial on page number 6. The editorial equates the threat posed by the locust swarm with the threat posed by other natural disasters that India is currently battling, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, cyclone in eastern parts of India, and floods and landslides in the northeastern parts of India. As we discussed, the invasion of these locust swarms into India poses a major threat to agriculture in the western parts of India and as well as in other states. Especially Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat might be staring at an agrarian disaster, and as warned by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, these locust swarms have the potential to threaten food security. See, these locust swarms generally repeat in cycles. Once an outbreak is reported, it is said to last around 2 years. Then the outbreak is followed by a 8-year silent period, and once breeding picks up again, we are going to witness another outbreak. So in the past, between 1964 and 1997, 13 such locust upsurges have been noted across Africa and Asia. But post 2010 until 2019, no major outbreak was noticed because there was no large-scale breeding of these locusts. But the editorial ties the 2019 locust outbreak with the impact of climate change. According to the editorial, the current locust outbreak is a direct fallout of the warming of the Indian Ocean over the last 1.5 years. See, in 2019, meteorologists had predicted that the monsoon season would be affected by the El Nino phenomena. El Nino refers to the unusual warming of the equatorial Pacific waters, which in turn affects the monsoon season and has the potential to cause droughts in India. But despite this prediction of abnormal rainfall during last year's monsoon, India received a record rainfall, primarily because a positive Indian Ocean dipole was recorded, which refers to relatively higher temperature in the Western Indian Ocean. Climatologists and meteorologists believe that global warming and climate change were directly responsible for last year's positive Indian Ocean dipole, which resulted in record rainfall in India and as well as in eastern parts of Africa. This record rainfall in eastern Africa turned the moist African deserts into a favorable breeding ground for the desert locust. So from 2019 onwards, a major locust outbreak was reported near the Horn of Africa, and favorable rain-bearing winds have carried these swarms across West Asia and Middle East, and they have finally brought them to India. So this goes on to show how natural calamities cannot be restricted or cannot be contained within national boundaries, and how their scale and impact can be accelerated by climate change and global warming. This also shows that it is futile to blame any particular country for a natural disaster, because an increase in the intensity and frequency of such disasters is a result of human greed and overexploitation, which has driven climate change and global warming. So in this context, the editorial calls upon all the countries to work together and cooperate with each other instead of blaming a disaster on a particular country. Then, in order to understand the gravity of the threat posed by the desert locust storm in India, we need to look at the drastic and draconian provisions that have been provided in the East Punjab Agricultural Pests, Diseases and Noxious Weeds Act of 1949. This legislation accords extraordinary powers to the district collector, and it allows the district collector to call upon any male above the age of 14 years in the district to render assistance to the authorities to help contain the outbreak of such obnoxious pests. Those who refuse to cooperate with the district administration, they can even be penalized and they can be imprisoned. Such a drastic provision was included in this legislation to help the district administration to fight against the infestation of such pests, and this goes on to highlight the threat posed by the desert locust swarm to Indian agriculture and food security. Now let's take up an article from page number 14 and an editorial from page number 6, which helps us understand the ongoing standoff between mainland China, that is the People's Republic of China, and Hong Kong. See, even though mainland China enjoys territorial sovereignty over Hong Kong enjoys a unique special status of its own, because until 1997, Hong Kong was under Britain. Later, Britain transferred the sovereignty of Hong Kong to China, but under one condition. The condition was that China was mandated to implement the one country, two systems as agreed upon in an agreement between China and Britain. So one country, two systems meant Hong Kong would be granted a lot of autonomy, and it would be treated as a special administrative region of China, and it would be governed through a mini constitution of its own known as the 1997 Basic Law. So this meant that even though China was an autocratic communist country, Hong Kong would continue to function as a democracy and would enjoy a lot of autonomy as a special administrative region. So even though China enjoyed territorial sovereignty over Hong Kong, its executive, legislative and judicial systems were granted a lot of autonomy under the 1997 Basic Law. As per the Basic Law, all matters would fall under the jurisdiction of the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong and as well as under the Hong Kong Legislative Council. As per this mini constitution, only two subjects were set aside for mainland China. This included defense and foreign affairs. But the subject of policing and national security has always been controversial because this involves sharing of jurisdiction between the local police of Hong Kong and the police and intelligence organizations from mainland China. See, under the current laws, law enforcement is the responsibility of the local police. But mainland police are allowed to join investigations, provided if they obtain necessary approvals from the local police. But over the last few years, China has been trying to alter this balance and erode the autonomy enjoyed by Hong Kong in order to exert its influence completely over Hong Kong. Even within Hong Kong, the citizens are very much divided. We have one pro-democracy camp which is opposed to China, and we also have a pro-Beijing camp which is seeking complete integration of Hong Kong with China. Over the years, China has made many attempts to weaken Hong Kong's autonomy. For example, in 2003, mainland China had introduced a bill against seditious newspapers that were operating out of Hong Kong. Basically, this was an attempt to stifle the voices of pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong and reduce opposition to the increasing control of mainland China over Hong Kong. Last year, a controversial extradition law had been proposed which would allow Hong Kong citizens to be extradited to China if they are facing any criminal investigation. This led to fears within the pro-democracy camp that China is looking to target the pro-democracy protesters by making them face the harsher and opaque criminal and justice system of China. So this proposed extradition law led to massive protests across Hong Kong, and these pro-democracy protests went on for a number of months in 2019. These pro-democracy protests of 2019 were finally brought to an end by the Hong Kong police with the help of the Chinese authorities by using the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse, and by using force to break up pro-democracy protests in the name of enforcing social distancing. Now the standoff between mainland China and the pro-democracy protesters of Hong Kong has been reignited with a new law that has been introduced in the Chinese parliament. This law, which is expected to be approved this week, would allow mainland China to draft national security laws that would have jurisdiction over the special administrative region of Hong Kong as well. This would allow the People's Republic of China to extend the jurisdiction of mainland Chinese police and intelligence agencies over Hong Kong as well. It would allow the mainland police to carry out joint investigation with the local police. It would allow them to collect intelligence and also provide advice to the law enforcement agencies and the executive authorities. Upon this, a controversial national anthem bill has been introduced in Hong Kong's Legislative Council, which seeks to punish anyone who disrespects the Chinese national anthem by imprisoning them for 3 years. So the national anthem bill and the controversial national security law has reignited protests in Hong Kong. See, as we discussed under the basic law, mainland China is supposed to exercise jurisdiction only in the matters of defense and foreign affairs. And Article 23 of the basic law clearly states that the Hong Kong legislature and the Hong Kong authorities have the sole jurisdiction to introduce national security laws. So as per the basic law, it is only the Legislative Council of Hong Kong which can make laws and repeal laws. But if the new bill that has been introduced in the Chinese parliament, if it is passed, it would allow mainland China to bypass the Legislative Council of Hong Kong and draft national security laws on behalf of the Legislative Council, which would allow mainland China to extend the jurisdiction of mainland authorities to Hong Kong. China has defended these laws by stating that the protests in Hong Kong is an outcome of external forces waging a proxy war against China. This is basically an indirect reference to the support that pro-democracy protesters reportedly enjoy from Western countries such as the United States and United Kingdom. China basically sees the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong as an attempt of the American and British intelligence agencies to destabilize China and question its sovereignty. But if you look at the local political environment in Hong Kong, it becomes quite clear that China is using the external angle as just an excuse to introduce harsher laws and exert its control over Hong Kong in order to dilute its autonomy and erode the one country, two systems mechanism. Recent elections to local councils and even upcoming elections indicate that the pro-democracy movement is gaining ground in Hong Kong. This threatens the pro-Beijing camp and China fears losing control over Hong Kong. So according to the editorial, this explains the real intentions of China behind the introduction of these harsh laws in Hong Kong. Now let's take up a column from page number 7 that has been written by the Vice President of India. In this column, the Vice President talks about the contribution of farmers to the Indian economy. The Vice President says that despite farmers making an immense contribution to India's economy and to India's food security, their right to trade has been unfortunately curbed through restrictive policies and through restrictive laws. See, right to trade is a fundamental right that has been recognized under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. But this crucial right has been denied to the farmers, and this is the central argument that is being made by the Vice President. Because see, until now, the laws in India did not allow the farmer to sell his produce to a buyer of his preference and at a place of his choice. The restrictive laws of the central government and the state governments mandated where the farmers could sell their produce and to whom they could sell their produce. So as a result, farmers were bound to sell their produce to the Food Corporation of India, to the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee, etc. But their right to freely sell to any buyer or to sell at any place had been restricted by outdated laws. The Vice President says that as a result of these laws, farmers' income had become dependent on markets, middlemen and money lenders. According to the Vice President, this outdated procurement and marketing policies of India was exploitative in nature as it was not bringing any substantial benefit to the farmer. Even though governments over the years have made substantial public investments in irrigation, institutional credit and minimum support price, they have not allowed the farmers to enjoy the fruits of their labor. The Vice President says that the origin of this restrictive trade practice can be traced back to the Bengal famine of 1943, which was seen during the Second World War. This famine led to severe shortages of food and essential items across the country. And this dire situation became the basis for the introduction of the Essential Commodities Act in 1955, which placed restrictions on stock holding in order to prevent hoarding and black marketing. Then came the APMC Act of the state governments, which further restricted the right of the farmers to sell their produce to a preferred buyer. According to the Vice President, these laws in combination have violated the right to trade of Indian farmers by severely restricting their selling options. A study conducted by OECD along with renowned economist Ashok Gulati has shown that by restricting the right of the farmer to sell his produce, the Indian government has been imposing an implicit tax of around 45 lakh crore rupees on Indian farmers. So according to the Vice President, this is grave injustice that we have done to Indian farmers, and he hopes that this injustice would be corrected with the measures that have been announced under the 20 lakh crore rupees economic stimulus package that has been announced by the Government of India in order to help the economy overcome the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we discussed a few days ago, as a part of the economic stimulus package, the government has relaxed and diluted some of the provisions under the Essential Commodities Act of 1955 and under the Model APMC Act, which can be replicated by the state governments. The Vice President hopes that these changes will finally allow the farmers to sell their produce as per their preferences, and this should hopefully allow them to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Now let's take up an article from page number 8, which refers to the spread of an invasive species in Kerala that is affecting the livelihoods of fishermen. See, first let us understand what is an invasive species. See, an invasive species is basically not native to the local ecosystem. That's the reason why generally an invasive species is also referred to as an alien species, meaning the species has come from the outside and it is not native to the local ecosystem. And such an alien species which has come from the outside, if it spreads rapidly and if it starts taking over the entire ecosystem, then it is referred to as an invasive species. The spread of such an invasive species can have a negative impact on the environment, the biodiversity, and as well as on human health and human economy. One popular example for an invasive species is the Parthenium plant, or also popularly referred to as the Congress plant. This plant was native to Mexico, Central America and North America, and it is basically a weed that can spread rapidly and affect agriculture and as well as local biodiversity and local environment. If humans are exposed to the pollen grains of the Parthenium plant, it is said to have an impact on human health as well. This invasive species is said to have entered India through the wheat imports that India was receiving from the United States as a part of the PL 480 food aid program. Since these imports took place under the Congress government, the plant has been nicknamed as the Congress plant. One such invasive species has been reported in the backwaters of Kerala, which is threatening the livelihood of fishermen. This article refers to a type of mussel known as the Charru mussel. It is basically a type of a mollusk and it is native to South America and Central America. The Charru mussel breeds at a very fast rate, and as a result, it has managed to overtake the local ecosystem. Over the last 2 to 3 years, the Charru mussel has replaced the local edible mussels and oysters, such as the Asian green mussel, the edible oyster known as moringa, and this has affected the fishing of mussel and clam species in the backwaters of Kerala. So as a result, the infestation and the invasion of the Charru mussel is having a direct economic impact on the livelihood of fishermen in Kerala. Studies have shown that the Charru mussel might have reached Indian shores by being attached to the hull of the ship, or their larval forms might have been carried to Indian shores by ships that were coming from South America and Central America. Experts also believe that Cyclone Okchi, which hit Kerala in 2017, might have pushed the Charru mussel from the sea deep into the backwaters of Kerala. This invasive species has spread so rapidly that it has affected a number of backwater canals in Kerala, including the Ashtamudi Lake, which has been designated as a Ramsar site. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. Which of the following statements are correct? Brahmaputra is a transboundary river flowing through India, China and Myanmar. It originates in the Manas Sarovar Lake region near Mount Kailash in Tibet. The Brahmaputra is navigable for most of its length. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect. Because see, Brahmaputra is a transboundary river, but it flows through India, China and Bangladesh, not through Myanmar. So statements 2 and 3 are correct, so option C is the right answer. Please look at this map. The Brahmaputra originates near Manas Sarovar Lake near Mount Kailash, and in Tibet or in China it is known as Yarlung Tsangpo. It flows in an easterly direction before it reaches the Great Bend at Namcha Barwa, and it makes a complete U-turn to enter India. After entering India, it is known as Dibang or Siang in Arunachal Pradesh, and it is joined by the Dibang River and the Lohit River. As the Brahmaputra flows through the plains of Arunachal and Assam, it is known to cause massive floods, especially during the monsoon season, and then it enters Bangladesh as the Jamuna. In Bangladesh, the Jamuna merges with the Padma River, which is the name given in Bangladesh for the Ganga River, and after merging, it forms the Meghna, which finally drains into the Bay of Bengal. This question has been asked because on page number 4 we have an article which refers to massive floods being caused in Assam and in few parts of Arunachal Pradesh by the overflowing Brahmaputra river and its tributaries. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which state is the largest producer of rice in India? The correct answer is option C, West Bengal. Please go through this map which is showing the top 10 rice producing states of India. As you can see, West Bengal is at the top of this list. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 4, Cyclone Umphan has affected paddy cultivation in West Bengal, which happens to be the highest producer of rice in the country. Now let's take up the third question. Which of the following statements are correct? Antitrust laws are also referred to as competition laws. They protect consumers from predatory business practices and ensure that fair competition exists in an open market economy. Antitrust laws are applied to a wide range of questionable business activities such as bid rigging, price fixing, monopolies, abuse of dominant position, etc. All the three statements are correct. Option D is the right answer. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? Securities and Exchange Board of India or SEBI is a statutory body responsible for enforcing the Competition Act of 2002. The liberalization of the Indian economy created a need for a competition law to prevent anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominant position by enterprises, and regulate merger and acquisitions. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect because it is not SEBI that is responsible for enforcing the Competition Act. Instead, the Competition Act provided for the establishment of a statutory body known as the Competition Commission of India. These two questions on antitrust laws and Competition Commission of India have been asked because according to this article on page number 15, Google is facing an antitrust case in India. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? The deep web is that part of the World Wide Web which is not accessible through regular web search engines. The dark web or the dark net forms a small part of the deep web. The dark web can be accessed only by using special routing techniques such as onion routing through the onion router or Tor. All the three statements are correct. Option D is the right answer. This question was asked because according to this article on page number 16, the data that was leaked from the Truecaller app is being sold on the dark web. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? The Galwan River flows from southern Xinjiang of China to Ladakh of India. Later, it flows west to join the Shyok River and is one of the upstream tributaries of the Indus River. Both the statements are correct. Option C is the right answer. This question on the Galwan River has been asked because it is one of the source of disputes between India and China. Please look at this map. The Galwan River flows through the Aksai Chin region, which is disputed between India and China. It originates in the Xinjiang province of China and flows through Ladakh and then flows west to join the Shyok River, which happens to be one of the tributaries of the Indus. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2016 prelims paper. Which of the following best describes the aim of Green India mission of the Government of India? The correct answer is option C, 3 only. Its main objective is to restore and enhance forest cover and respond to climate change by a combination of adaptation and mitigation measures. In fact, the Green India mission is one of the 8 core missions under India's National Action Plan on Climate Change. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, examine the special provisions provided to the 5th schedule areas under the Indian Constitution? The second question, evaluate the threat posed by locust invasion to Indian agriculture. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.